Good morning students. Today we are going to learn about the pollination in the flowers. Up to previous class we have learned about different type of the ovules, and after completion of the ovules we have seen the monosporic, bisporic and tetrasporic type of the development, embryo sac and embryo sac structure, and what are the different parts are present in the embryo sac and their functions also we have seen. So, in this class we are going to learn about the pollination. So, first of all, what is pollination? Yes, pollination means transfer of pollen grains from anther to stigma. What is pollination? Pollination means transfer of pollen grains anther to stigma. Okay, transfer of pollen grains from anther to stigma is called as a pollination. There are different types of the pollinations are present, self pollination and cross pollination. Okay, then if you see the self pollination, first one is autogamy. What is autogamy? Autogamy, self marriage. Auto means self, gamy means marriage. Here it is also called as a self marriage. So, what happens here? Autogamy means transfer of pollen grains from anther to stigma. Anther to stigma of same flower in same plant. So, what is the same flower? What is the same plant? For example, this is the plant. Let us assume this is a plant. Here a flower is present. In this flower, male and female both are present. What are present? This is a male and female. Both flowers are present in a same flower and same plant. Okay, that is said to be autogamy. Next, geitonogamy. Here what happens is transfer of pollen grain from anther to stigma of two different flowers of a same plant. Transfer of pollen grains from anther to stigma of two different flowers. Two different flowers of same plant. Okay, that is said to be geitonogamy. Here, if you see the geitonogamy, it is a plant for example, then here one flower is present, here one flower is present. Here male flower for example, here what is present? Male. Here what is present? That is the female. Then transfer of pollen grains from anther to stigma. From anther to stigma of two different flowers. This is one flower, this is another flower, but it is in the same flower. That is said to be geitonogamy. It looks like a cross pollination, but it is not a genetically it is not a cross pollination. Genetically it is a self pollination. Genetically it is a self-pollination. Do remember, genetically it is a self-pollination. Geitonogamy, very important point under the geitonogamy is that is genetically it is a self-pollination. Economically or structurally when you observe, it looks like a what is that cross-pollination, but it is not a cross-pollination, it is a self-pollination genetically. Next one, xenogamy. Xenogamy. What is xenogamy? Xenogamy means here two different plants are present. Here one plant and here another plant. Then here this is the male flower and here it is a female part is present. Transfer of pollen grain from anther to stigma of two different flowers of the two different plants. So, let us see that transfer of pollen grains from anther to stigma of two different plants flowers. So, this is one plant, this is another plant. Two different plants flowers between the pollination is taking place, that is called as a xenogamy. The literary meaning of the xeno is foreign. What is that? Foreign. Okay. So, the marriage, gamy means marriage, the marriage between the two different plants, foreign plants is called as a xenogamy. Now, first we are going to learn about the adaptations in self-pollination. Adaptations in self-pollination. Adaptations. Yes. What are the different adaptations of the self-pollination? If you see, some of them are opened flowers, some of them are closed flowers. Based on that, the flowers are divided into two types. One is clistogamous flowers, another one is chasmogamous flowers. Here, in the clistogamous flowers, the flowers closed in nature, means they were in a bud state, they were closed. So, whenever they were closed, what happens? The transfer of the pollen grains from the anther to stigma within a flower, it will be taken place. So, 100% there is a possibility of the self-pollination. Okay. So, anthesis is absent, flowering is absent. So, that is the reason why self-pollination 100% will be taken place. Not only self-pollination, 100% we can able to see seed setting. Assured seed setting is possible in the clistogamous flowers. Okay. Whereas, chasmogamous flowers, when we see, these are opened flowers, means flowers will be opened, but there is a possibility of the falling of foreign pollen grains also. So, that is the reason why possibilities are there for the transfer of pollen grains. Another plants, flowers, pollen grains may be fall here, but whereas closed one in clistogamous, it is not possible because totally the flower is closed, it looks like a bud. That is the reason why assured seed setting also possible. So, what are those? Let us see. Oxalis, example if you see Oxalis, Viola and Commalina. These three are the examples for the adaptations of the self-pollination, especially clistogamous, chasmogamous. When we see in these types of the flowers, we can able to see two types. What are those? One is clistogamous, another one is chasmogamous. So, what are the differences between these two? Let us see. First in the cleistogamous flowers, what we can see? Anthesis. Anthesis is absent. Okay. What is anthesis? Anthesis means flowering. Always it will be in a bud position. Okay, that is the reason why anthesis is absent. Next, it is closed. It is closed flower. It is closed flower. Where do you observe? They may be aerial or underground. These flowers may be, where do you observe? Aerial or underground. Or these flowers are dull in color. Which color? Dull in color. Okay. Underground flowers, where do you observe? Arachis hypogea, that in a groundnut. Where do you observe? In groundnut you can able to see the closed flower, groundnut. Okay. So, this is about the cleistogamous. Cleistogamous means the flowers will be always closed. Then one more important one, what do you can see? Assured seed setting. Very important characteristic, assured seed setting also you can able to see. But whereas chasmogamous, anthesis is absent, no, here anthesis is present. Next, closed flowers, these are open flowers. Okay. Next, aerial, some of them, most of them are these chasmogamous aerial only. Why? Because they have to open. So, most of them are aerial. Next, flowers are bright in color. Okay. Usually self pollination, wherever, in whichever the plant, if we observe, their assured seed setting is possible. But especially in the cleistogamous, there is a more possibility. Why? Because always the flower is in a bud position, so that it is very easy to get the seed setting. So, in the cleistogamous flowers we can able to see most of the autogamy performing flowers you can able to see assured seed setting, but in this cleistogamous has the more probability for the formation of the seed setting. This is very important. Oxalis, viola, commalina examples for the cleistogamous and chasmogamous. These examples are very important. Next, adaptation 1 we have completed. Next, adaptation. Okay, bisexual flowers. In some of the example, if you take Cadiranthus, in the Cadiranthus what happens? Male and female flowers are present. Male and female flowers are present in a same flower. So, that what happens? It leads to self pollination. So, due to presence of the bisexual nature, then there is a possibility of the self pollination. Next, third one. Homogamy. Homogamy. Example, mirabilis. Here what happens? Male and female flowers mature at the same time. Mature at the same time. Whenever they mature at the same time, there is a possibility of the self pollination. Okay. Next, bud pollination. Example, Pisum sativum. So, in this what happens? Actually, there is a possibility of the flowering in the Pisum sativum, but before it flowers, means when it was before it flowers means when the flower is in a budding position only, pollination takes place. Pollination takes place. Sir, what is the difference between this bud pollination and clistogamous pollination? Like that you may get out. Here bud pollination means here for this flower there is a possibility, it has a capability to bloom like a flower, but whereas in the clistogamous flower throughout their life they never bloom, always bud in position in the clistogamous. But bud pollination in Pisum sativum, such type of the plants when you take, there is a possibility from the bud to flowering, from the bud to and flower there is a developmental stage is there, but there we do not find, where in the clistogamous flower we do not find a developmental stage from the bud to flower, throughout its life bud will be there. But here before it forms flower, when it was in a bud position only, self pollination is taking place. Okay. So, these are the some of the adaptations in the self pollination. Now, let us see about the cross pollination. Cross pollination adaptations. Okay. Bisexual flower, dichogamy. Okay. What are those? Bisexual flowers, when you see, that is nothing but a dichogamy. Okay. In this there are two types are there, one is protandry and protogyny. Protandry and protogyny. Okay. See here in bisexual flowers what are present? Male and female, both male and female both flowers are present. Both flowers are present in a single flower. In a single flower both what are the male and female, both parts are present. Protandry, proto means first, andry means develops. Andry means what is andry? It is a male part, male reproductive part. Okay. So, first which will be developed? Female reproductive part will be developed. Okay. Now, here what is the next one? Protogyny. Proto means first, gyny means female part, that will be developed first. Protandry means first male part will be developed, protogyny means first female part will be developed. Okay. Now, yes, in this part when you see here, there are, you can able to see what are the examples. One is sunflower. What are the example? Sunflower, cotton are the good example for this. But whereas here mustard is the example for the protogyny. Then after in the bisexual means in the same flower both male and female flowers we can able to see. Okay. But which one is developing first? Based on that, protandry and protogyny both are present. Okay. Next one, due to that what happens? First androecium is developing. Whenever androecium is developing, then gynoecium, that is the stigma, is not developing. When the stigma is not developing, what happens? Whatever the androecium is developed, that anther, inside the anther pollen grains are present. These pollen grain they transfer to another flower. Due to that what happens? Cross pollination will be taken place. For example, first protogyny means stigma will be developed. When stigma is developed, by that time in the same flower anther is not developed. When the anther is not developed, what happens? Pollen grain will not be produced. Then whenever other plants flowers pollen grains fall on the stigma, then what happens? There will be a possibility of the cross pollination. So, this is the adaptation, one of the adaptation in the cross pollination. Then unisexuality, that is here this is a bisexual, no? Now I am going to explain unisexuality. Okay, this is already we learnt in the previous lesson. Based on that, monoecious and dioecious, monoecious and Dioecious. What is monoecious and what is dioecious? Monoecious means on the same plant two different flowers are present, one is the male, another one is the female. One is the male, another one is the female. Dioecious means two different plants are present, here female flower is present, here male flower is present. So, now transfer of pollen grains from anther to stigma within the plant, but two different flowers. But here transfer of pollen grains from anther to stigma from one plant flower to another plant flower. Dioecious, that one. So, what are the examples for the monoecious? Acalypha, next coconut, cucurbits, etc. Next here mulberry, papaya, cannabis, etc. So, this is the second type of what is that adaptation in the cross pollination. Now, let us see third one. What is third one? Prepotency. Propotency means, what is propotency? Let us see. First, this is the stigma, style, this is the ovary, then ovules are present in this manner. Okay. On the surface of the stigma, now I am taking, this is the A pollen grain, this is the B pollen grain. So, now I am indicating A, I am labeling as B. Okay. So, A is self pollen, A is self pollen. Self pollen means whose stigma we are taking, that flower's pollen grain is A pollen. Okay. Here B I am writing. B is a foreign pollen. Foreign pollen means another plant's pollen. Okay. Among them, the self pollen, the A pollen is there, no, it develops slowly. Then foreign pollen develops fastly. It develops fastly. See now, propotency. In the propotency, even the self pollen is present, it is not developing, but foreign pollen is developing a pollen tube. Okay. This is called as a propotency. Example, apple. Okay. Next. Hercogamy, male and female parts. Between there will be a mechanical barriers. Mechanical barriers. So, it leads to cross pollination. Here also propotency also what happens? Cross pollination only. How the cross pollination is taken place? First self pollen is developing slowly, then foreign one is developed fast. So, that self pollination is prevented and cross pollination is promoted. Okay. Due to that, it is also one of the adaptations of the cross pollination. Next, hercogamy. Hercogamy example, Asclepiadaceae family, that is Calotropis. Sometimes what happens in this, the stamen will be trapped in the petals. When it is trapped in the petals, unable to send the pollen grains into the stigma, then due to that what is happening? Self pollination is preventing. then stigma will receive the another plant's flowers pollen grain. Then what happens? It promotes the cross pollination. So such type of the physical barriers are present in the hercogamy. Sometimes their sizes may be the varying. So different factors are there under the mechanical barriers. Okay, what is the example? Calotropis. Next. Self incompatibility. Self incompatibility. In the self incompatibility example, Abutilon indica. Abutilon. What happens in the self incompatibility? Already we have learnt regarding the incompatibility, acceptance and rejects. See, this is a stigma. Ovary, ovule. Sometimes this is a pollen grain. Then even the same plant pollen grain, falls, then it never allows to germinate the pollen tube. So what is the difference between the propotency and the self incompatibility? You may get out. In propotency, what is happening in the prepotency? In that it is developing, pollen tube is forming but slowly forming. The germination, the development of the pollen tube is very slow. Okay, foreign pollen grain is very fast, but here slow not, at least it is not at all developing. Okay, self means its own plants, its own flowers, pollen grain is not developing. It is it is a self. Okay, now it is a B, it is a foreign. Okay, it is developing the pollen tube. Then here, what purpose it is stopping to not germinate the pollen tube? In order to promote the cross pollination only it is stopping. Okay, it is one of the peculiar exceptional characteristics in the plant kingdom, that self incompatibility. Incompatibility means rejects. It rejects the development of the pollen grain into the pollen tube. Okay, compatibility means, what are the two terms we learnt in the previous class? Incompatibility means it rejects to develop pollen grain, means there is no formation of the pollen tube, that is the incompatibility. Next, compatibility. What is compatibility? Accepts to develop the pollen grain, then pollen tube is forming. Okay, where do you observe this one? Incompatibility, Abutilon indica. One more also present, the last one is, that is sixth one, heterostyly. Heterostyly means here the style length will be different. In some of the flowers, the style length will be small. Due to the length of the style is very small, then what happens? In that same flower, the stamens will be very high. Okay, then heights are different. So that is the reason why stamens from the anther, pollen grain will be dispersed through the air into wherever the style is very high. Same heights style and anther is present nearby the flowers, then pollination will be taken place. But in the same flower, the style height and the stamen height will not be same. If the style height is small, then the stamen height will be high. So what purpose it is happening? In order to promote the cross pollination, to prevent the self pollination, such type of the self arrangement we can able to see in some of the flowers. So heterostyly, tristyly will be there, bistyly will be there. Okay, so whatever it may be, the style, the length of the style will be difference in different flowers. In order to overcome the problem of the self pollination, such type of the mechanical barriers we can able to see in the tri-style, otherwise bi-style, tri-style, different types are present. So, these all are comes under the adaptations of cross pollination. In first one, what did we learn? Adaptations in self pollination. Second one, what did we learn? Adaptations in cross pollination. Now, let us see about the what are the pollinating agencies. Pollinating agencies. So, there are agencies or agents, both are same. Pollinating agents, first one I am writing about abiotic factor or agent. Next one biotic. Okay. Abiotic means if it is a wind, if wind is playing important role, or if the wind is involving in the transferring of the pollen grains, air pollination, wind pollination, it is also called as anemophilous. Anemophilous pollination. Then if water involves in the transfer of pollen grains, then hydrophilous. Hydrophilous. In the abiotic factor, most of the plants go through the wind pollination. Okay. So, this water pollination hydrophilous is very less as compared to the wind in abiotic pollinating agent. Next biotic. Biotic means through the living organisms. Through the living organisms, if the pollination takes place, the type of the pollination is called as a biotic pollination. For example, animals are involving zoophily. Okay. Now, let us see first one, insects. If the pollination takes place through the insects, that is called as a entomophily. If the pollination takes place through the birds, ornithophily. Then if the pollination takes place through the bats, chiropterophily. If the pollination takes place through the snails, melicophily. If the pollination takes place through the snakes, ophiophily. If the pollination takes place through the ants, myrmecophily. If the pollination takes place through the squirrels, arborous or lizards, squirrels, lizards, these are arboreal animals, that is called as a therophily. Like that many are present. If pollination takes place animal, zoophily. If the pollination takes place through the humans, human beings, anthropophily. Etc. Like that many are present. Okay. So, what are those? These are the pollinating agents. Now, let us see some of the characteristics of the pollinating agencies. These are very important. One question will be asked from this types of the pollination. Previously many times, sometimes if the pollination takes place through the bird, then 4 options will be given: entomophily, chiropterophily, melicophily or ornithophily, like that. So that we have to learn through the which organism the pollination is taking place. Next, these are the some of the factors or characters. Sepals or petals are called as a accessory parts of a flower. Okay. Yes. First, hydrophily. Anemophily, entomophily, ornithophily, chiropterophily. Okay. Now, what are the different characters? Let us see. Yes. See, nectar in hydrophily absent. Okay. In anemophily also absent. Then entomophily it is present, ornithophily also present, and chiropterophily also it is present. Okay. Then odor, that is a smell. Here absent, but whereas in entomophily it is present, ornithophily absent. Okay. Next, color. Okay, what is that? Next one is color. Hydrophily, dull flowers. Anemophily also dull flowers. Entomophily, bright flowers. Ornithophily, bright flowers. Then chiropterophily, dull flower. Next, size of flower, small or inconspicuous. Here also inconspicuous. Here also small or inconspicuous. Here entomophily, larger flower. Here also larger size of the flower. Here also large. Then here sepals and petals, very negligible, reduced. Anemophily also reduced, but whereas entomophily highly developed. They are also developed. Yes. So, what are these? Based on the characters of a flower. A flower, how many characters usually to produce nectar, odor, smell, and usually the petals possess some colors, due to that insect will be attracted, like that water and wind, insect, bat or what is that, Chiropterophily, that is a bat, Ornithophily, that is a bird. So, how they were attracting, we are seeing size of the flower. Next, sepals or petals. These are the some of the important factors in the role of the pollination in different agents. Let us see one by one, anemophily, hydrophily, entomophily, like that. Next one, first I am going to explain about anemophily. Anemophily means if the pollination takes place through the wind, okay, then most of the plants perform here anemophily when we see under the abiotic factors. Okay, then the flower exhibit foliage. The flowers exhibit foliage. What is foliage? Foliage means flowers are present above the leaves. Above the leaves. The flowers are present above the leaves means the flowers are present up to certain heights. Whenever they were present at the certain heights, whenever the wind currents blow, then what happens, along with the wind currents from the anthers, pollen grain will be dispersed or that will be transmitted through the air currents from one place to another place, then wind pollination will be taken place. The flowers are in heights. The flowers are in heights. Then here whenever they were in heights, then how they were height, the stamen length is very more, that is one of the factor, and swing and hanging nature they had, swing and hanging nature. Swing and hanging nature they had. The flowers usually stamens had swing and hanging nature. Where do you observe Kotkin type of inflorescence? Mulberry, Kotkin type of inflorescence you can able to see. So, this is about the characteristics of the flowers in the anemophily. Now, in the same anemophily, what I am going to explain regarding the male part, that is the androecium or stamen. Just now only we learnt. What did we learn? Anemophily. Anemophily, what happens in the anemophily? Heights, they were present at particular heights, the first point. Another one is swing. Okay, what did you write? Swing and hanging is a characteristic of swing and hanging of the stamens. Next, these are light in weight, pollen grains. Pollen grains characteristic, if you see, light in weight. Light in weight, non-sticky, and more in number. They are more in number. Very, very important. Pollen grains are light in weight, non-sticky and more in number. Why they are producing more in number? Because it is a wind dispersal. Sometimes they may reach to the stigma or may not reach. In order to continue the pollination or in order to facilitate or drop many, at least out of the many, at least one or two, if it is fall on the stigma, then it promotes the pollination. That is the reason why the number of the pollen grains produced in the anemophily is more. Okay. Then some of the important peculiar characteristic when we see here in Pinus. Winged pollen grains are present. Winged pollen grains, important character. Pinus, winged pollen grains are present. Okay. So, this is about androecium. Now, let us see about the gynoecium, that is the stigma. Yes, gynoecium, if you see, stigma, it is a sticky in nature, and it traps the pollen grains easily. Okay, so that is the, and here more number, no, pollen grains are more number, no, here less number egg or the ova are less in number, that is almost 1 only, almost 1 or 2 like that, less in number compared to the male gametes pollen grain, then female gametes are less in number. Okay, so these are the some of the characteristic of the anemophily. Okay, then now let us see with an example. I am going to explain about the maize. Yes, what is maize? Maize belongs to which family? Poaceae or Graminae. Maize belongs to Poaceae or Graminae. It is a monoecious plant. It performs gytenogamy. Monoecious plant means, what is monoecious? Male and female both are present in a same plant, but in different places they are present. Okay. Okay. Next, gytenogamy. What is gytenogamy? Now let us see. This is about it is a female flower. Female flower consisting of hairy like structure. What they had? Hairy like stigma is present. Why? Because whenever, for example, this is the male tassel, this is the male part of a flower, usually we are calling as a tassel. So, whenever the male gametes or male pollen grains transfer, it in order to trap or for the trapping purpose, hairy like structures are present on the surface of the stigma. And one more character, stigma has a bifid nature. Stigma has bifid nature. Bifid nature means the stigma possesses okay, this is the bifid stigma. Bifid stigma, and also on the surface of the stigma small hair like structures are present, so that it is called as a feathery stigma. Okay. Now it is very easy to trap the pollen grains whenever the pollen grains are transmitting through the air. Okay. And one more important thing is, in the maize, in the plant kingdom, maize has the largest inflorescence. Okay. That is the one of the important character of the maize. So, on the same plant, male and female, this is a male plant, maize plant if you assume, then male and female parts are present on the same plant. Under the dioecious we have learnt gytenogamy means transfer of pollen grains from one flower anther to another flower stigma of a same plant, that is called as a gytenogamy. Even already we have written the definition of the gytenogamy and autogamy. So, whether it is satisfying the definition here or not, also you can see transfer of pollen grain from the anther of the male flower to the and stigma of the another flower in the same plant is called as a gytenogamy. Okay. So, now this is about the anemophilous flowers characteristics. Now let us see about hydrophily flowers characteristics. Hydrophily. What is hydrophily? If the pollination takes place through the water, now that is called as a hydrophily. Okay. Then pollination through the water. For the pollination water involves, then that is called as a hydrophily characteristic. Then in this hydrophily performing flowers, when we see here, usually these flowers made up of a mucilage layer, the male and female mucilage layer. What purpose a mucilage layer is present? To avoid the wetting, to protect from wetting. The mucilage protects from wetting. What is wetting here? Usually these are the aquatic plants or the water plants. Then what happens, whenever the water is stick to the male and female reproductive parts, then that may be the spoiled. In order to protect itself from the spoilage around the male and female parts, what is present? A mucilage, a sticky nature having a layer will be present. If it is a sticky nature having layer or mucilage layer is present, water drops rolls down, they may not stick to that particular part. So that is the reason why mucilage layer playing an important role. So what is the mucilage layer involvement here? Protects from the wetting. Now let us see the androecium or stamen. Androecium or stamen. Here pollen grains. Here also pollen grains are many, produced many. These are covered with mucilage. Same point again, protects from wetting. Okay, and these are weight compared to the ovule. If you see, these weight are very less, that is the reason why they can able to float in the water easily. Next, pollen grains are many, no, in the gynoecium. Stigma. Okay, stigma, usually we know the different adaptations are there for the stigma. Then here usually stamen. Before the pollination, one type of the stamen will be there. After the pollination, the stamen modified like a spiral like structure. Then stigma, sticky nature, here also to trap, okay, for the trap. Okay. Next, it is also made up of mucilage for protection from wetting. Okay. Then how many types of the pollinations are there in the hydrophily? There are two types, epihydrophilous, another one is hypohydrophilous. What are the two different types of the pollinations in the water? Let us see. Epihydrophilous means if the pollination takes place through the water, that is called as a epihydrophilous. Now first let us see about the epihydrophilous. What is epihydrophilous? Pollination takes place on surface of water. Example, Vallisneria. Vallisneria, it is also called as a eel grass, tape grass, eel grass and tape grass. Vallisneria another name, eel grass and tape grass. Then here Vallisneria, there are two plants are there, one is male, another one is female. this is the water. Yes. Now, if you see the Vallisneria plant, here Vallisneria produces some male gametes. Here these are the male flower, it is a male flower of Vallisneria. Then these branches somewhat extends, it will be extended like this. Okay. These male gametes reaches to the surface of the water. For example, I am drawing the male gametes like this. Okay. Like this, male gametes are floating on the surface of the water. Next, here female plant also present. What is present? Female plant also present. Female plant, when you see here, this is the female flower. We can able to see what is this? What is this? This is the style. For example, here this is the male gamete, through the surface of the water it moves and falls on the stigma. It moves and falls on the stigma. Due to that, what happens here? Then transfer of pollen grain from the anther to stigma. Where it is happened? On the surface of the water. Where it is happened? On the surface of water. That is the reason why, what do you call this one? Epihydrophilous. Epihydrophilous. In this part, what happens? The stigma when you see, or else the style, it is a stigma, no? The style when you see, first the style, this part is a style, this style it is erect in nature. First it is erect in nature. Okay. Actually it will be like this, the flower will be like that. The style first erect, then after it will be coiled. The style will be coiled. Okay. Then what purpose it will be coiled? Because when it is coiled, then it comes down, then remaining fertilization, that all will be taken place. But pollination, where it is taken place? On the surface of the water. So, what is the example for the Epihydrophilous? Vallisneria. Okay. Now, out of the two types of the hydrophily, we have seen only epihydrophily. Next, we are going to learn hypohydrophily. Hypohydrophily. What is hypohydrophily? Under the water, inside the water, pollination takes place. That is called as a hypohydrophily. Example, Zostera. What is the example? That is the Zostera. Then in the Zostera, when you see, okay, this is the stigma in the Zostera. So, this is the water. Here pollen grain, now pollen grain has fall here, that pollen grain coiled pollen grain you can able to see. What is it? Spiral or coiled pollen grain. So, where it will be? Inside the water, not surface of the water. You can able to see here, it is inside the water. The pollen grain is coiled or spiral. Why the pollen grain is coiled or spiral? Because here exine is absent, very important, that is exine is absent. Exine is absent means what is that? Sporopollen is not present. When the sporopollen like that exine is absent, what happens? It can able to rotate or spiral coiled, so that here it is spoil. Okay, what is that? Spirally arranged pollen grain you can able to see in hypohydrophily. What is the example? That is the Zostera. Whether it may be the epiphilous or hydrophilous, these male and female gametes or male and female parts are made up of with a mucilage coat in order to get a protection from the wetting. Next, let us see about entomophilous. Entomophilous means if the pollination takes place through the insect, 80% of plants perform through the insect pollination, especially who is involving the organism honeybees are involving in the insect pollination. Okay. Insect pollination, to perform the insect pollination, what are needed? First of all, attractive pollen petals has to be present. Okay. If you see bracts, some of the plants bracts colorful, that is bougainvillea. Okay. In some of the plants leaves are colorful. Leaves are colorful in some of the plants, that is euphorbia. In some of the plants petals, sepals and petals colorful, that is mimosa. Then in insect pollination what happens here? In the insect pollination, usually they possess pollen kit. What is pollen kit? It is a sticky or oily and colorful in nature. So, due to consisting of different bracts, leaves, petals and pollen kit, usually insects will be attracted towards the flowers, then insect pollination will be taken place. Then let us see, it provides some rewards. Among those they may have, first one, what do they provide? Rich sugar content. Rich sugar means in that, due to presence of the rich sugar, what happens? It can able to, the different types of the insects to come and take this all. Some of the insects, beetles, what are those? Beetles, they lay eggs. Beetles lay eggs in Amorphophallus. Beetles lay eggs in Amorphophallus. Amorphophallus inflorescence, it is a 6 feet of height. So, even though 6 feet of the height, the insect when it is taking the nectar and even it lays egg in the Amorphophallus inflorescence. Sir, when the egg will be developed, again when it will come out means, whenever the egg or the Amorphophallus inflorescence, whenever inside the embryo is developed, when it will become as a fruit like that, then that time the moths of the beetle also will come outside. So, these all rich sugar, providing the rich sugar, and beetles will lay egg in the Amorphophallus. These are the some of the pollen rewards. Okay. Then not only like that, even some pollen grains, for example, if you see edible pollen grains also we can rosa, okay, papaver, like that edible pollen grains also present. What is next one? Edible pollen grains. Edible pollen grains, rosa, clematis, okay, papaver, magnolia, like that plants when you see in that also pollen grain can be eaten. So, what are these? These all are the rewards. Okay. Some of the Aquilegia bambusa, if you see, Aquilegia is a plant, Bambusa infloris is a insect. This insect acts like a pollen robber. Pollen robbers. Why we are calling as a pollen robbers? Aquilegia. What is this plant? Bambusa. It is a insect. It is a plant. From this plant, this insect to go and it will take total pollen grains or the pollen kit. Okay. Then due to that, what happens? These are treated as a pollen robbers. Sir, why we are calling as a pollen robbers? Due to the eating or taking of the nectar from that plant, there is no use for the plant. But remaining all areas when you see here, while it is taking the nectar, then pollen, what happens here? They involve in the insect pollination. So, in one way it is useful for the pollination, but even for the pollination also there is no involvement. That is the reason why nothing use is happening to the plant, so that those are called as a pollen robbers. This is about the entomophily. Yes. Then remaining after the entomophily, ornithophily, then some of the mechanisms are present, that is liver mechanism. Those all will be discussed in my next class.